left off, we were talking about the idea of there being fixed costs and the idea of there being variable costs. All right? The fixed costs didn't change regardless of the level of output. The variable costs, they changed when output changed. Okay? But we then decided that there was going to be a total of all costs of production. What did we call the total of all of the costs of production? Do we remember?
Total cost. Total cost.
Total cost, exactly right. Well done. All right, fancy name. Yeah. And what about this one? This one was the cost per unit. What do we think cost per unit was going to be?
Average.
The average of the total costs. Well done. Or average cost. Now, how you calculate them? Yeah. All right. We had a wee formula that we needed to use. So tiny little bit of maths. Yeah. All right. So if I'm going to use TC as an abbreviation, a code for total cost. Because I don't have to write total cost all the time. Okay. So total cost is going to be equal to mathematical equation, the total of your fixed costs, PFC, which is different from KFC, by the way, just saying, plus the total of your variable costs, PFC plus TVC equals TC. That's the maths behind the total cost. The maths behind the average cost is you're going to take your average cost equaling your total cost. So you take your total cost and you're going to divide them by 1. That's it. All right. So that's the maths at this point. Okay. Now, hopefully that's not a huge challenge at this point to figure those ones out. Now, yeah, they might, as said the other day, they might try and trip you up a bit and give you that number and give you that number and ask you to work that number out. Okay, rearranging the equation to figure it out. Or they might give you that number and that number and ask you to work out that one. Okay. Again, none of that should be too difficult for you. It will take a little bit of practice, but the big thing is to actually remember the formulas, because we don't give you a sheet of them. We don't walk into the exam, here's my sheet of formulas. It has to be up here, okay? So you will need to know those. Total costs are calculated using what equation? Average costs are calculated how? Where you go? Right, so you're working out how to calculate total costs, typing that in, and then how to calculate average costs. Well done, Tracy. Very good. Yes, Eric, that's right with regards to average costs, but what about total costs? Yep, so that's the average costs. Yeah. All right, well done. Wanting the total costs as well. Good work, Isaac. Very good. On Andy, have a go. Angie, have a go. What do you think the equations are? Darwish? How do you work out total costs? What equation would you use? What equation would you use for average costs? Good work, Darwish. Absolutely right. Well done. Give me another couple of seconds. Come on, Charles, have a go. And ye, Andy. Yeah, all right. Well, that's an interesting way to do it. Yes, you could work it out that way, Andy. That's a very mathematical way to do it. Good work, Charles. Well done. Oh, look at that. Wow. What's happening there? What do we think? What's happening to your average costs? And then if this was output, or if you like quantity, that a business is going to make, there's your costs. We've got to price them. And then we need to look at, remember, average cost is total cost divided by quantity. So here, if we start from 0, let's produce one product. Well, that one product is going to cost us this much. Okay? Remembering average cost, total cost, total quantity. But as we then move to 2 products, average cost is declining. Why do we think that? Why is that happening? What are we doing? Come on, math magicians. What happens to your average score if you increase the number of games that you play?
It increases. Wait, what?
Decreases.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. All right. It's going to decrease to a point. Then you're going to reach a low point, and then it's going to start increasing again. And all the while, remember that average cost is total cost divided by quantity. Okay? So here, there's your average cost. So that might be 15. And you might be making 5. So 15 times 5 will give you the total cost. The idea is what we're doing is we're spreading the costs over and increasing output. All right, we've got more output. We're making more quantity, lots more quantity. So we're able to spread those costs out. So therefore, each additional unit we produce is more units that we can spread the costs out over. Yeah. Okay. So you've got a big bill that you need to pay. It is always more friendly, perhaps, if you can spread the cost of that bill over a number of months. However, you do reach a point when you're producing where it's actually going to start costing you Or maybe it's more expensive to produce. Yeah? Maybe you've reached a point where you've done everything you can in your business, but to produce even more, you're going to have to hire even more workers, and that's going to cost you even more, right? So maybe this is all the workers, they're doing their best, absolutely fine, wonderful, brilliant people, they're producing more and more and more. But eventually, you're going to reach a point where they can't produce anymore. You've then got to hire even more workers, and that's going to start costing you more. Yeah. So, with that in mind, here's what we're going to do. Okay. We're going to say from here to here, we've got a decrease in average cost. But from here to here, we've got an increase in average cost. So what about this bit in the middle? Well, if you're a business person, okay, you're looking at that. That is your minimum cost, the lowest cost you can possibly have per unit. Okay? So for a business, that is your technical optimum. What that means is that that's the best place for you to be, because up until here, you're producing. You can do better by producing more. Up until here, when we go past that point, we could actually do better by producing less, because our costs are rising here. Yeah? Now, there is an economic concept to understand here, and it's, yeah, all right, it's not necessarily always an easy one to get to, but we will get to it. And on this side of the line, we're going to call this side economies of scale. Whew. Now, if you've never seen the word economies, it's a very old-fashioned word. It's about economics, yes, but it's about saving. Okay? Oh, there's some good economies with that one, right? You're in economy class seating in an aeroplane, yeah? It's about cost saving. So if you've got economies of scale, you are saving some of your costs by increasing your output. But on this side, your costs are rising. So you don't have economies of scale here. Instead, got this. This one's slightly different. You've got diseconomies of scale. Right, I know, language, terminology, I know, coming at you pretty quick. But the idea here is that it's not the Jamaican version of economies of scale. Diseconomy, isn't it? Yep, no. All right? In this particular context, it's kind of like it's the negative, it's the opposite. So instead of saying uneconomies, you'd say diseconomies. Right? So here, economies of scale are there. We know they're there because what's happening is your costs, your average costs, are decreasing. Here, we know that diseconomies of scale are happening because our average costs are increasing. So the point being, as we increase output, our average cost is falling, therefore we have economies of scale. Here, as we increase output, our average costs are rising, so we actually have diseconomies of scale. All right, so if you've been in a big factory and everybody's pushing and shoving and getting in everybody's way, yeah, that's a diseconomy, right? It's not productive. You're losing productivity with that sort of a scenario. Now, maybe you're able to build a new factory and therefore start again, okay, because you've got bigger capacity, but because you're limited by fixed factors, what that means is that because you've got that factory size, that's all you've got. So put more workers in, put more workers in, put more workers in, but eventually they're going to start getting in each other's way and your costs are going to start rising. That's the idea that we're heading towards here, right? But big thing for you to note is two things. Firstly, that idea of the technical optimum. Where is the best place for a business to be? Right there. Because if they're anywhere less than that, they can do better. They will be better off by producing more. And if they're anywhere above that, they'd actually be better off by producing less. So the best quantity for them to produce is that one. Right? So that's one thing to take away. Second thing to take away is to have a look at the curve itself. How would you describe the shape of the curve? What does it look like? How would you recognize it in the street if you were to trip over it? Hold on, someone said something. Oh, where'd it go? It looks like a smile. It does look like a smile, yes, and well done. Yes?
A semicircle.
A semicircle? I don't know, you're a mathematician. Does it look like a semicircle? Not entirely sure what a semicircle looks like in that particular context. Parabola, gosh, you're thinking very outside the boxes here. A quarter circle, maybe. What else? Go simpler. Like, really simple. Upside down hill, okay. A curve, oh, you're on the right path. Yes, and you're on the right path. Right? If I was to start saying some things and see if you can keep up, all right? You ready? A, B, C, D, it's going to be a long game. E, F, G, H, see where I'm going, I, J, long game, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q. What does it look like?
M.
U. Yeah, it probably doesn't look like U, but it looks like the letter U. Kind of. That was a long game, that one. Yeah. In fact, if you read textbooks, which, yes, I do, right? If you read textbooks, they quite often will describe the average cost curve as being a U-shaped curve. All right, so if you read that, you think, well, what does that mean? That's what it means. Like a smile. All right, good man, yes, like a smile. Smile. Yeah. Right. Okay. Whew. All right, moving on. What is happening to average cost as your output increases, and why do you think this happens? There you go, have a guess based on what we were just discussing. What's happening to average costs as your output increases? Start decreasing until it reaches a point, starts to increase. Yes, that's all right, Andy. Well done. Okay, Gianelli. Yeah, talking about marginal cost there, but okay. Right ideas. Yes, average cost go down. Yep, okay. Good work. Well done, Yasin. That's a very good idea. Right path, Lynn. Okay. Good work going on. Let's increase his answer yet. Worked. You guys go. Remember the shape of it. You got costs here. What's your price of it? $80. So here's your output or quantity. the idea here is, as we spread the costs over output, our average declines. As we increase employment of additional resources, average costs increase. Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever done a whole lot of work with averages before. Take screenshots and stuff if you want. But the main idea is that your averages tend to fall. Okay, so if you add more tests, right? So you've scored. Let's have a look. All right. You scored 10 out of 10 for that one. You've scored 10 out of 10 for that one, 8 for that one. So what's happened to your average?
It decreases.
Decrease. Yeah. So you add more, you only got 7 for that one. That's decreased again. Yeah.
Wait, Mr. David.
Yeah.
But if all of your averages are like the same, let's say if all of them was 10, wouldn't the average still be the same?
Yes, it would.
But is that like something impossible to achieve?
Nope. I wouldn't say it's impossible to achieve. Okay, remember your average cost is your total cost divided by your quantity. So if your quantity is increasing, but average cost is staying the same, then your total cost would also have to be staying. No, it would have to be increasing, what, by the same amount? Come on, mathematicians. Yeah, so if total cost was 10, quantity was 1, your average cost would be 10. So therefore, in order for average cost to be 10 again, total cost would have to be 20 and output would have to be 2, and that would be 10 again.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So to keep average cost the same, you would actually have to see an increase in your total costs proportionally to your average costs. Yeah. Right. Which is possible, but it's going to mean each game you need to be getting better than the game before.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Which, yeah, is quite unlikely. And remember, your total cost is your total of your fixed costs. Well, they don't change, but your variable costs do change. So if that is increasing by a consistent amount, then it's going to be the variable cost that's doing that.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not a mathematician. You guys are probably much better at maths than I. Okay. But the idea is that you're spreading your costs over your output. So therefore, there's less and less and less average cost. All right. However, eventually, your average costs are going to start rising because your total costs are going to start rising. Right? Your total costs are going to be increasing based on those variable costs, which are then going to start increasing at an increasing rate. Right? Because it's not going to be enough just to employ more workers, whereas before you might have been able to employ one worker and that was enough. Well, now to get the same amount of output, you need to employ 2 workers. And then the next time you need to employ 3 workers to get the same amount of output. And then what's going to happen is because you've employed so many workers, they're going to get in each other's way, right? And they're going to everything's going to start falling apart. They're going to produce less output. okay, because they're not as productive as they could have been. Now that's quite a complicated idea for you to understand, and it's a little bit beyond what you need at this point, but because I was asked, it's basically what we're talking about. Now it can be a straightforward idea, yeah. So think of a business, because this is very mathematical. So think of a business. Think of a business that operates in Malaysia, and it's also got a branch of its business in Russia. What could you see as a possible problem with that? Anybody been to Russia?
Always be cold. Like the environment isn't the same.
Yes, that's true. The environment is definitely not the same. Any other problems?
The language.
Putin.
Yeah, Putin. All right. What else? Relative word
And
letter L.
the environment, they like the sun falls down like in the midnight, then the sun will fall down.
Good point. That is a real problem. So if you're operating in different parts of the world, then when one part of your business is awake, the other part's asleep. Yeah. So that can cause a problem. You're trying to increase your output, but half your workforce are asleep. Yeah. So that might be a problem. Anything else? What about just anybody tried to speak to someone in Russia? Or anybody tried to speak to somebody who is Russian? What might the problem be?
You don't understand.
Language barrier.
So what happens when you are a CEO of a business, right, and you're trying to explain to somebody, possibly over Zoom, over Meet, yeah, these days, in Russia with a time difference, and you're trying to explain production processes and how to put goods together, yeah? How are they going to understand it? Yeah? What if they get it wrong? What happens then?
Things go wrong.
Things go wrong. I want you to make 1,000 hamburgers. And what happens if they make 100? Oh, I got the number wrong, comrade. I thought you meant 100. That's my attempt at a Russian accent. Yeah?
It was a good one. It was a good one.
Yeah? Do I dare tell you my Russian joke?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got 2 Russian jokes. Yeah? Two. All right? It has to do with, the first one has to do with the Olympic Games. Yeah? All right? So there's 2 guys who crossed the finish line. Okay? The first one, you know his nationality because he's Finnish.
Oh,
And the second one is drunk.
The second one was desperately trying to catch up, so he was Russian.
Russian.
Bro.
That was the first one. The second one, I had a Russian student in a previous school, and he was a lovely kid, absolutely lovely. He ended up being an absolutely star basketball player, by the way. And he was very unorganized. He would have all of his notes just on loose pieces of paper randomly in his bag. And then he would be just, what one was this? I was writing on a piece of paper somewhere, yeah, this sort of an idea. And one day he was sitting there rifling through his bag, trying to find his notes. And I just said to him, what are you looking for? Eastern Europe.
oh, that was a good one. That was good. That was good.
No.
That you know, he was fine with the joke. He found it funny. So that was, yeah, he was an interesting chap. He was lovely, absolutely lovely. He got his girlfriend's initials tattooed on the back of his neck for some reason, and she got his initials tattooed on the back of her neck. Go figure. All right, now. The problem is that there's a communication problem at that sort of stage. So you're growing your business, but you can't be everywhere. You're the CEO. You have no idea what's going on. And it could be going all wrong. Yeah? Hi, Isaac. Welcome back. right? It could be all going completely wrong. I mean, you think, I mean, we're a school, there's only 70 staff, I think, by last count, here at Nexus, okay? Mr. David Griffiths is the boss. So in theory, he could walk around the school all day and actually see what everybody does. He could, yeah? But what if we had 150 teachers, 200 teachers, 500 teachers? Is it then possible for him to go and see every single one? You see what I'm getting at? Is that you increase the size of the business and you're going to end up with more and more problems because of the size. Yeah, maybe nothing to do with the business necessarily. It's just how life is. Yeah, it's just so big that you can't fix this problem because you don't even know it's a problem. Yeah, and that idea of miscommunication happens all the time in business. And by the way, miscommunication is not a contestant in a beauty pageant, just in case you're wondering. Okay, that was a good joke. Miscommunication. All right. Okay, she was in the same competition as misunderstand and misrepresented.
And the male beauty pageant, Miss Tur. Was that good?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, things we need to make absolutely certain that we know at this particular point. Firstly, what is or are fixed costs and variable costs? How do you work out total cost? And what would total cost look like on a graph? Pocket. Let's have a think. Yeah. So we've got costs here. There's output here. Now, you've got a certain amount here that you have to pay because you've got fixed costs, right? So total cost equals total fixed costs plus total variable cost. So when you're producing nothing, you have no variable costs, but you do have fixed costs. So therefore, total cost is actually going to start from here or wherever. And this here is going to be your total fixed costs. That number. Okay? So if you want, you could actually do one like that. Because that's your total fixed cost. It doesn't change regardless of the level of output. So it's just going to be like that. But your total cost, because each time you produce more, you then start adding variable costs. So your total cost is then going to go like that. So it's going to look like. Cool. What is average cost? We talked that one about. And what does it look like as a graph? And we had the idea that it's the average of your total cost. So average cost equals total cost divided by quantity. So it's actually going to end up starting quite high because it starts from here divided by 0, divided by 1, that much. And then it's going to go down, we spread the costs. Up. Average of your total costs. Smile. Or an upside down hill. Absolutely. Had not thought that one. What about average fixed costs? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Let's get rid of these. Gone. There's your total fixed costs. There it is. So what would the average of your total fixed costs be? So average fixed costs is going to equal total fixed cost divided by quantity. So if that number is 10, you divide it by 0, it's 1. Okay, divided by 1, it's 10. You divide it by 2. What's 10 over 2?
5.
5. That's less, isn't it? So your average of your fixed costs is going to do this. Average fixed costs. Like that. Now, it kind of trails down and it's going to almost hit the axis, but not quite. And there is some mathematical thing about numbers that get closer and closer and closer to 0 but never hit it. You all know what that all is because you're mathematicians, and that's essentially what it's going to do. Again, it's that same idea. You've got one number and you're spreading that number out amongst all of these costs, quantities, right? You're spreading that total cost, that total fixed cost, amongst all of the quantity of output that you produce. So if it is $10, that's how much it costs you for your rent. Spread that out across your entire output. Just as if you've got a big bill to pay, or mum and dad have a big bill to pay, they are more likely to want to spread that cost out over time so that it reduces the average. Yeah? So if mum and dad have a mortgage, they're more likely to pay their mortgage, or even paying rent. You're more likely to pay it on a monthly basis than save it all up and pay it in one big lump sum. Right? You're much more likely to do that. Hire purchase kind of works in a similar sort of way. Right? You're paying a fixed amount over time, so that average amount should decline. Yeah. It works that same way. I don't know if you've seen that, if you've gone into shops. I mean, I went in and I had a look at the iPhone 12, and they were offering terms for the iPhone 12, and you'd pay this amount per week, sort of idea. Sounded all right. Right, and then you work out that that's that amount per week for 2 years. Goodness, it's quite a lot of money in that case. But it's spread out over time, so the average you pay is actually a whole lot less. Yeah. It's just a matter of whether you want to pay that every week for that period of time, as opposed to paying the one lump sum for the whole lot. So that's what an average cost curve will look like on a giraffe, on a graph. Now, the next one talked about your variable costs, and we talked about those as being, they're the costs that change when your output changes. So you've got more wages to pay, for example, right? What was that going to look like? Oh, goodness me, exciting. Get to draw lots of graphs today. Look at costs, they're in dollars. There's your output. Quantity as I can. Now, it is variable costs, so it has got a very strong relationship with your total cost. Okay? It is the average, so total variable cost, okay, average variable cost divided by quantity is going to be, total variable cost divided by quantity is going to be your average variable. Same sort of idea. Yeah. We worked out before that your total variable costs were going to be increasing. Okay, they were going to come from here and go up. So therefore, when we spread them out, initially they're going to decrease, and then, oh look. What does it look like?
A U.
It's another U-shaped curve. Now, it's not the same because this is average variable cost as opposed to average of the total costs. Right? Remember, the total cost is also going to include that small part which is fixed. So even though, right, so your average total cost is actually, if you, again, this is maths, okay? This is just, this is just maths, okay? So average of your total cost is going to equal the average of your fixed cost plus the average of your variable costs. Yeah? So So all that we are doing is just plotting this one. But when we plotted your average of your total costs, the difference between that number and that number is going to be that one. And remember, that was declining over time. So if you really wanted to dig deep into this, and this is beyond what you need, then this number and this number are actually going to get closer and closer and closer together. Because this number is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as output increases. Getting really close to zero, but never quite hitting it. Wow, mind's blown. What maths are we doing? Goodness me, exciting. So that's average variable cost. It looks like the U-shaped curves, because it is. It's a U-shaped curve. It's another one. It's actually in business a really important one, because remember your variable costs, one of those variable costs was going to be wages. Right? How much your staff want to be paid. It's also going to be your resource costs, the ingredients for your hamburgers. So if that's the case, then that's a really important curve, because it's telling you how much it is costing you per unit for those variable inputs, which is a significant thing, because however much you produce, okay, however much you produce, you've got to pay these people. If you don't pay those people, they're not going to work for you. So however much revenue, right? So if revenue is up here, yay, okay, because you're able to pay your workers. But if you're only earning revenue down here, you're not able to pay your workers, and they're not particularly likely to work for you at that point. Now, a lot of this is beyond what you need at this point, right? The point being is that the equations relate to each other. The point being that the curves relate to each other as well, and when you illustrate them, okay, so average fixed cost declining, average cost U-shaped curve, average variable cost U-shaped curve, right? And over time, when you start doing IB economics, you're going to learn much more about why the maths does what it does and the significance of those particular curves. Right? But for IGCSE economics or ICSE, you don't actually necessarily need to go that far into it. But if you are wanting to, I'm happy to go through it with you. But it might just go right at this particular point. Right, now, here we go. What I'd like you to do next, and this will be our last thing that we do for the day, before you have a mental break instead of a breakdown. I would like you to have a go at drawing, illustrating an average fixed cost curve as a graph, as a giraffe. I know it's difficult to do it because you're on the computer and all of that, but have a go. There we go. Last activity for the day, and then you can review all of this before next week. Next week, we'll be back to just 2 lessons as opposed to this week's 3. That'll give the other class a chance to catch up. Which, incidentally, is what the baby tomato got told by its father tomato when it was lagging behind on a walk. Got told it needed to catch up. Tomato.
Okay, that was funny.
No! Good work, Wing Ching. That's looking very good. Also, Yasin, I like it. Well done. Still waiting on some drawings. Goodness me, you've got all heap curves in there, Gino. Well done. Yeah, that's looking good. Well done. Fantastic. Great job, team. Andy, good job. All right, okay. So team, we're going to finish there for the day so that you can have a bit of a mental break. You can have some lunch. You can go for a stretch, have a run around the house. Yeah, it was an old joke, yes, and yes, I know. I think it's a Christmas cracker joke as well, by the way. I have a very long memory. Now, the idea next week is that we're going to continue on from here. Okay, so it's good idea. It will be a good idea to review your understandings about all the costs. Okay, how they relate to each other, the formulas, the graphs, etc. Before we move on, because one of the next steps, remember, that we're going to be taking is we're then going to start looking at how businesses are able to make a profit. And part of that is going to be looking at another concept called revenue, and there's going to be a little bit of maths with that too. Not a lot, a little bit. Okay, and it will very much mirror the maths that we've already done. So it's not going to be a big challenge for us. And then we're going to tie all of that understanding together, discussing what happened when the skeleton was scared. Don't know what. Chilled. Very good. Well done. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to finish there for the day. As we'd say in the land of my birth, hey korera, which means goodbye for now.
Thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you.
Mr. David.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. David.
See you. And turn off recording.